In this video, we're going to talk about the relationships between the drums and bass from the drummer's perspective. The drums and bass are the meat and potatoes of that song. It's that solid foundation. So it's very important that they play together and they're on the same page. As a drummer, there's no better feeling than playing with a bass player that really locks in with you and can follow along with your kick drum pattern. It just makes your drums and that rhythm section just a really solid, beefy, powerful section. As opposed to if the bass player is not playing with that kick drum, you're kind of fighting, and when you kick the kick drum, they don't play, and then when they're playing, you're not hitting the kick drum at the same time, and so there's a lack of that unity and power. As a drummer, you have a couple goals. You're the timekeeper, you also can control dynamics, and you're leading everybody into each sections of the song. And those are three important roles to be able to follow. So really paying attention to that click track and making that one of your main focuses to listen to, and striving just to be right on with that click track. And with dynamics, you'll be building the song up and you'll be bringing that song down in the quiet parts, and also being able to drive that song with what you're playing. And lastly, you're guiding everybody through each section. So in between, let's say the intro and the verse, you're doing a little fill that brings everything back down to that verse, and then in between the verse and the chorus, you're building up that fill to lead everybody to get bigger into the chorus. Maybe the bridge is a soft bridge, so you're after a big chorus, you're doing a fill and kind of leading everybody into slow down. You're leading everybody to quiet down to get to that quiet bridge. And maybe in that quiet bridge, you're doing some subtle cymbal work, keeping that tempo going, so everybody has something musical to listen to keep time during those sections. So the drums is a really cornerstone of the song. Let's talk about things to do and not to do. Just like every instrument in a band, in a group, drums can be a conversation. So the example I give a lot is if everybody in the band is talking at the same time and telling different stories and doing their own thing, like nobody can really pay attention to actually what's going on, and your attention's drawn to other instruments, and it's just kind of a mess. So we want everybody to be on the same page as they think of all their parts throughout the song. So the most basic thing on drums is just play simple, play in time, and lead everybody through each section of the song. Here's an example of playing simple and consistent. You want to play a simple and consistent kick and snare pattern. This allows the bass player to easily follow along and be able to lock in with that kick. As a bass player, their main goal is to listen to that kick drum pattern. So whatever kick drum pattern you're playing is what the bass player is trying to play with. So for instance, if you play a really simple, repeatable beat with the kick drum, it's easy for the bass player to play along to. As opposed to if you're playing something a little more complicated and fancy, and it's not a consistent beat, it's going to be really hard for that bass player to follow along. And it's frustrating as a bass player to finally lock into what the drummer's doing, and then all of a sudden they change that, and then now you have to really listen and try to figure out what they're going to do and try to guess what they're going to do to play along with them. Here's an example of playing simple and letting the bass player easily follow you. This right here is your kick drum, and this is your bass player. See how they're lined up? I also have another kick drum pattern here where we're playing more, and then we'll listen to each of those. Here's the first one. Okay, so there's the drum pattern for this song. They play very consistently. They didn't stray away from that. And a couple things here. Let's look at when it gets into the verse. So he adds one kick drum in, and it kind of helps you lead into that next section. Let's listen for it. Yeah, that right here is that boom, boom, buka. also, so that was just a tiny variation in it to kind of guide you to the next section, to say, hey guys, next section. And then also going into the chorus.
And all my life is in your hands, in your Jesus.
Right, just a real tasty, simple drum fill, right, getting into that chorus. All right, so now let's go listen to a drum beat that's not very consistent, and let's see how that feels. Okay, here we go. So now we're looking at this one with added kick drums.
Instead of bringing all I have, I'm prone to give whatever's left. Oh, remind my soul you died my death.
All right, so we just added a bunch of different kick drum patterns and possibilities there. And what did you think of that? How did that feel to you? To me, it didn't feel like it locked in with the bass. It just was something extra that didn't necessarily need to be there in this particular song, in this particular moment. Not every song has to be a very simple drum beat, but it does need to be a very consistent drum beat. This one wasn't very consistent. I had different ideas going on here, and then my ideas would change here, and they would change here. So as a bass player, I can't follow along with that. So when you're rehearsing with the band, it's a good idea to listen to the bass player and notice, is he following along with you? Is he having a hard time playing with you? And if you notice that, maybe you can simplify your drum part a little more, and or like between songs you might talk to him, say, hey, I noticed on this song we weren't locked in. What do we need to do to lock in? Do I need to play something simpler, or maybe I need to follow, or maybe as the drummer I need to follow the beat that they're playing? So you guys can kind of work that out and then come back together with a more solid foundation for this song. And generally, especially in praise and worship, there's not very many variations of a beat that's like suitable for that song. Like, it's kind of whatever that you feel. Usually it's whatever you first feel the beat should be is probably the correct one. There's no sense of making something more complicated just because, or maybe because we're kind of bored playing that basic beat. And again, it's more important to have a simple basic beat that locks in and feels good and lays that great solid foundation for the rest of the band to play with than it is to have something more flashy or complicated or fun to play, but it's harder for that bass player and everybody to lock into that. All right, guys, thanks a lot.